Hi there, Jaden here. Welcome to the video. I hope you guys are ready for this video because it's about this month's challenge that I have done before. Some of you know it, some of you don't, but I will tell you anyways. In this video, I will show you guys my participation in the Art Month Challenge Swordtember! That's right, it's back, baby! I didn't want to miss out one of my favorite Art Month challenges, especially when it comes to drawing weapons. Now, for those who don't know what this is, allow me to tell you what it is about. Swordtember is, like I said, an Art Month challenge for the month of September. There is a list of 30 prompts for the 30 days of September, and each day there is a given word prompt on the list. Artists will make a themed sword based on a given prompt on that day. Some are easy, some, complicated, but you can design them however you want. In my opinion, I think the main point is not only drawing weapons, but also to test your creativity on weapons. If you want to test your art skills, especially when it comes to making weapons, this month challenge is for you. Back to the topic. Usually for Swordtember, I would use the creator's prompt list, but for this year, I thought of spicing things up by making my own prompt list. You guys already saw it, but I'm gonna show you guys again to show how awesome this is. Look at it, a masterpiece. It's my first time making a Swordtember prompt list, and surprise, surprise, I participated in my own list. Once again, wanting to spice things up. So I'm gonna show you all on how I came up with the process of each of these wonderful weapons. I hope you guys like it. Now let's get started. Shing! Day 1's first sword is abstract. Starting out with a challenge with a very complicated prompt. At first, I didn't know what to start off with, design-wise, because I know when it comes to abstract art, they're basically asymmetrical, but can also form a representation of something. I've done it only once, but I figured why not I try to do it again. For the design-wise, I just made a bunch of random shapes. Both blade and the handle that cut to form this sword. Again, I'm not used to abstract art, so I gave it my best. For the blade, color-wise, I just added some random colors. Basically the entire colors of the rainbow. Okay, I just spun my color wheel on Ibis. I didn't want the whole thing to be one singular color. Now for the handle, I just went and used basic colors like silver and brown. And yes, they also have random shapes. The entire thing is just shapes that can form this sword. An asymmetrical way. But all in all, if I were to make an abstract art again, I would do it in like 10 years. Starting off with a hard prompt, but glad I dealt with this early, I guess. Day 2 is chemistry. Now, the first thing that came to my mind about chemistry is what I was hoping for since I was a kid, but never got to do it. And that is boiling chemicals. Like a scientist, I went and did some research on what ideas I could come up with this design. Of course, I made sure that liquid chemicals were involved in the sword. Besides that, I wanted the chemicals to be in like this one flask that's being boiled at the bottom of the glass, so that the chemicals can bubble and be transferred to the top of the blade. I didn't just add flask in a little blade. I added those stands that can hold the flask. I'm not sure what they're called, but they do held them together so that way they won't break. I made it both handle the blade and the chemical flask to keep it sturdy. One thing I noticed when I was looking at some references is that the chemicals can be transferred with a little straw from one flask to another. So I added a beaker that's next to the fiery can thing that has extra chemicals. Oh, and just for a little touch up, I added the atom logo that represents science to the sword. Even though I'm not a fan of science and never got to mix chemicals back then, I'm glad I managed to somewhat make it as a weapon. Huh. I guess there's nothing wrong about science anyways. Day 3 is Sailor. Okay, I gotta admit, I was kind of excited for this one. When it came to this prompt, the first thing that came to my mind that's heavy and possibly deadly are anchors. So I used the anchor as a main factor for this design. Mostly on the blade. But not only that, I did a little research on sailors, just to make sure that I don't mix them up with pirates. Rather than just an anchor, I added a little decoration around the handle. I portrayed the handle to be like a spyglass, but at the top half of the handle, I made it to be a little ship. The whole boat, the steering wheel, and I made a cute little sail that's on the side. I added a little rope that sailors use to tie knots, control the sails, and whatever they do with rope. I'm not a sailor, I stay indoors. I put it at the bottom of the sword because I picture that when you hold onto the rope, you can swing and spin the sword around. I'm not gonna lie, I've been thinking about this kind of stuff for weeks. Like holding this weapon and like swinging it around. I've been thinking about it before I got to editing this video. And you can't have a boat without barnacles on them. Yep, I added some barnacles on the blade to like give it a theme. And they are staying there because why not? It's only my third sword and I feel so attracted to it. Day 4 is origami. Well, there's no explanation for the sword. For the sword, I just didn't want this to be a singular color. I know when it comes to origami, you just use one singular paper to like make something, but I went and got a little creative and did some arts and crafts. I made sure that the sword is like formed into 3 different parts: the blade, the crossguard, and the handle. For the blade, I wanted it to be like when you fold a paper in half, you somehow leave a little gap at the top, which is kind of annoying, I agree, but I just went with it. The crossguard is nothing special, but for the handle, I wanted to give it a little decoration and add an extra paper to spiral around the handle. It's nice to add a little pattern than just adding a singular part, but for them to be together, I went and added small tape so that the whole sword can like stick together. This might not count as origami, but I don't care. I used to put tape when I was making origami back then. If I were to make something like this in real life, I would just smile and laugh if that actually happens. Actually, I'll think about it. This idea will be in my archive. Day 5 sword is the future. No, it's future. It's future. Okay, this one was kind of a challenge, because in my eyes, seeing the word future, I thought of tech, like cybernetic tech. I had a hard time with the design, so I looked up some references for cybernetic swords, none of which helped. So I went to the source that could help. Cyberpunk. Judge me all you want, I was committed to my own challenge. So for this sword, I made the blade to be hollow, yet dangerously energized by an energy substance, which I don't know what to call because I am not fully developed into this blade. Just think of it as like a lightsaber from Star Wars. Now for the handle, it'll be like the engine for the blade, that has a supercharged energy. You can see the console tube that has the energy stuff, which can be transferred to the blade. Not only the blade that glows, but I wanted the handle to have some of the parts to glow as well. I basically made this sword to be powered by energy. So I think that counts as the theme, maybe? I don't know. And yes, I made the power energy blue, because I feel like that fits right. Also, I like blue. Day 6 sword is the season. I was planning to make a sword that would have all the seasons, but I didn't think of a design for it. So I instead made a sword based on my favorite season, fall. A nice time where it doesn't get too hot, a little bit chilly, but I still find the fall season interesting. At first I had the handle design down of a giant pumpkin with an orange leaf at the center. At the bottom of it, it would be a stick with a scarf around it, because it's fall and it gets chilly and we wear comfortable clothes. At the tip of the handle, it's just a half acorn. I added it because it involved the blade. Speaking of the blade, I was going to make it have like a pattern of fallen leaves while wearing a hat at the top, but I thought it'd be interesting to have a tree as the blade instead. Of course, I made the tree's leaves color into a warm color because, well, the leaves change around that time. I keep having second thoughts about the tree, but I decided that it's staying there. And of course, you can't have a tree in fall without falling leaves. So I added leaves that are falling from the tree. I was going to make the tree have less leaves and mostly bark, but I just didn't want to do that because I'm too lazy for that. If I were to make swords based on another season, like winter, summer, and spring, I'd probably do that for fun like I did with this one. Day 7 sword is kind of a funny one, because the prompt is toy. I'm being honest, I already thought of a design in mind. When it comes to toys, I thought of the most famous toy around, the Jack-in-a-Box. But rather than just being a clown that pops out, it would be a tiny blade that pops the weasel instead. Figured I thought it'd be a funny image of like when you spin the handle on the side of the Jack-in-the-Box, the music would play, and then when it reaches to the end, the blade would spring and come out instead. It wasn't that complicated for the idea, but the design was kinda a bit when it came to coloring. I decided that I would use a triadic color palette of the primary colors red, blue, and yellow. Took me a little bit on what the colors are being placed. I didn't like how the colors were placed at first, so I made some changes until I began to grow on how the colors are going to turn out. Like most toys, I would say that this sword would not be a deadly weapon, but an actual toy. Let's also say that this one would not be for 3-year-olds. If something like this actually exists, I wouldn't be surprised. Day 8 sword is Barbarian. I've made a Barbarian sword for Swordtember before, but I decided why not add the prompt to my list. Also, I love barbarians. Thanks a lot, D&D. When it comes to hearing the word barbarian, I thought of these words: brute, dangerous, and having very, very big weapons. So I made sure that the sword is very big, especially around the blade, and can do a lot of damage. Now, for the design, I did have a little trouble when it came to the handle, because I'm not used to barbaric weapons, so I looked up some references for barbarians. And I wasn't paying attention, so I went with the flow of my design. Color-wise, it wasn't that much hard, although I did try to make the blade a little red when the barbarians rage, but I realized you can't put your rage in the sword. Oh wait, extra damage, never mind. For the design on the handle, I added a little skull because, of course, I feel like barbarians would keep the skull of their enemies as decoration to something. Also because I thought it looked cool. Now, I did put a logo like somewhere on the handle that you can see here. I made it into a clenched fist that has a red aura around it. I wanted to portray it as like the barbarian's rage, because I always think that when a barbarian goes into a rage, I always see them having this red aura around them. If I were to be in a D&D session, and if I play as a barbarian, I would try to make this as my main weapon. Day 9 is Abomination. Okay, not gonna lie, I don't remember why I put this word on my list, because I had trouble making an abomination sword, coming up with a design, in fact. So, just in case, I looked up what the word meant. Something that is not normal in society. And that's when I thought of one thing: monsters. But to make things more fun, I went and used the following monsters as my inspiration and combined them into this monstrosity. Dracula's vampire fangs as the pointed tip of the blade, Frankenstein's stitched skin as like the part of the blade and the handle, the blob slime that can help stick most of the sword together, the headless horseman's jack-o'-lantern head on the handle, which have half human parts, and then the rest is like half jack-o'-lantern, with wings, one a vampire and one a slime with a wing bone, and extra things like a bone and a finger. I try to make this thing look dead, since, well, monsters are technically undead. I did not have fun with the sword when it comes to adding specific details. You might say that I have overdone with this one, but in my eyes, I would say that this thing that I made is definitely something that is not normal in this world, and definitely an abomination. Day 10 sword is a little funny one, because this sword is box. No, I didn't make it a boxing glove sword, because I didn't think of that. Although that does sound cool, but no. I made a sword that is completely made out of boxes. For this sword, I made different size boxes. I thought it'd be a funny idea of an asymmetrical sword, like the one I did with the abstract sword, but different, and simple, and not as complicated. For the handle, rather than just being small boxes, I used both paper towel and toilet paper rolls. I know it doesn't count for the theme, but I thought it'd be a cute little detail. But people might be confused what this thing might be. So I added another cute little design detail of a little drawing of a sword on top of each part of the boxes, with sparks on it. Like how a kid would play boxes and use their imagination on what the box could be. I made stuff like this in the past, especially when it came to boxes. So, not to brag, but I'm kind of a box artist veteran. But there's not much explanation about the sword, so boxes. Boxes, 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 boxes. Boxes, boxes, boxes. Day 11 sword is Dragon. I had a hard time with the sword when it's based on the mythical creature. I was planning on making a full body of a dragon, but I backed down on it because I'm a coward. So I went ahead and used a headshot instead. I still struggled drawing a headshot. And again, I'm not used to drawing dragons. But after I got the sketch down, I went ahead and designed the full sword. For the blade, since dragons are mostly spiky, depending on the type, I added a bunch of spikes on the sword. Also, you can't have a dragon without wings, can you? So I went and added wings around the handle. For the coloring, at first I was going to make it a blue dragon blade, but something came to my mind of one thing that can make this sword feel complete. A certain fruit that can support theme. A dragon fruit. Yep, I use a dragon fruit as my inspiration for the coloring. I actually liked how it came out, even though I don't usually use pink as much, but it just feels nice for this one. I made the blade on fire with this green flame, because why not? Despite me not having any experience of drawing dragons per se, I'm surprised how this came out. And it makes me want to try dragon fruits. Great, now I'm hungry. All rise for day 12, because day 12 is Judgment. There's not much explanation for this, Your Honor, because at first I was going to make the sword basically a giant bladed gavel, but I figured I wouldn't make a sword that wouldn't have a pointed blade. I instead used a balance scale as one, but I didn't manage to use a gavel, but to hold on to the scale. And to add a little nice touch, I added a logo of a pointed finger in a front view between a flat-like table, because I wanted to portray it like the sword to judge you, to prove if you're guilty or not. I don't know what I'm going with this. I'm trying to explain as much as I could. The point of this blade is basically like a trial, to judge people for a fair trial. Oh, and the weights on the scales can move, because I thought it'd be funny design for the scales on top of the sword to move, like an actual weight scale. Yeah, there's really not much explanation about this sword, but let's just say that justice has been served. Excuse me. Day 13 sword was a bit of a tricky one, because this sword is the past. For the theme of this sword, when it came to the word past, I thought of prehistoric times. So I used those big wooden things that cavemen use when hunting their prey. Not only that, I just didn't want it to be like that giant wooden thing, but I figured I made something that feels more involved in the past. I added a tooth from a mammoth that's strapped around the handle and that has a rock to the side. I don't remember why I put that there, but I just wanted to add a rock. And a small tooth at the top of the wooden thing to portray it as like the tip of the blade. Now for the end of the handle on the sword, I thought it'd be a nice touch up to cover up around the handle, because this whole sword is mostly wood and I don't want the holder to get a splinter. Speaking of rocks, I did add obsidian to it at the end. I know it doesn't make sense, but I think people around that time wouldn't know that since it's a rock, because rocks can also kill your prey. I think if a caveman actually sees this and looks at his weapon, I feel like they would be jealous. I don't know, but that would feel cool. Guys, I think I cooked on this sword, because day 14 sword is cook. I immediately thought of cooking utensils for this one. No, I didn't use a knife as a blade, that would be too obvious. So I instead used a popular utensil known to man, the spatula. The thing that can flip from one side to another. Thank you, SpongeBob. I have no idea what I'm going with. Now, with that blade being covered, for the handle, I added some extra cooking stuff. A roller, a net that mixes things, if you can still see it. It's like, it's there, you'll see it. A spoon and a fork, and of course a bowl that holds these things together, as well as a scooper. You can see the scooper on the side of the bowl. And as the handle, of course I was going to add the knife. Are you kidding me? You can't cut things without one. And yes, it's being covered. so no one can get hurt. The coloring wasn't much of a challenge, but for the finishing detail, I added some stains on the spatula to portray it as batter, and to show that it's been used. I'm not sure how people would use this to cook, but I gotta say, the way I made this sword, chef's kiss. Allow me to tell you a story about a tale of a sword. Day 15 sword, if you will. A sword that can tell many tales of many stories. It says that this sword has been crafted by a special wood as the handle that forms a little table that can hold stacks of books together, with approved books next to the book stamp at the bottom of the handle. Only approved books can form this blade, and once formed, the enchanted book can spread its magic of storytelling, with the pages of the book to spiral and form the final piece of the weapon. The blade, completely made out of magic from the enchanted book. Long story short, I made a fantasy fairy tale sword. I was going to make a stack of books like I did with a box sword, but this feels more creative. In conclusion, I had fun making this sword, and with not much explanation for the sword, I did have fun with it. The end. Well, it's not the end, there's still like 15 swords left. Day 16 sword was puzzling, because the prompt is puzzle. I looked up some puzzle activities that I can use to make this design. So I used the following: chess, checkers, a Rubik's Cube, flow, puzzle pieces, and tangram. Allow me to explain. For the handle, at the end were black and red checker pieces, and a king chess piece at the end. Chess and checkers do count as a puzzle game, since you do have to think of a solution to win those kinds of games. For the blade, at first I was going to make a blade entirely made out of puzzle pieces, which I did at the first half, but not as the main blade. I instead made a triangle tip that is based on the puzzle tangram, which you can form a shape based on many colored shapes. It's like fill in a way. Now in the middle is a cube. At first I was going for a Rubik's Cube and like coloring with a bunch of random colors, but I instead used the puzzle flow to fill in the spaces and to add some extra pizzazz, because I really love flow. I am obsessed with flow. I'm obsessed with puzzles in general. So yeah, as I mentioned, this sword was a challenge, but I liked how this came out. Hopefully it doesn't break. Nah. Day 17 sword was a bit of a treat, because this sword is sweet. That's a prompt. The prompt is sweet. I was kind of prepared for this one, since I do have a bit of a sweet tooth. Okay, a big sweet tooth. Don't look at me. For this sword is completely made out of sweets, of a candy cane handle with a waffle cone that is holding a cake with jelly beans around it, with a chocolate bar on the side. I just wanted to add chocolate because I love chocolate. On top of the cake are some kisses, if you see here, a cookie on one side and another waffle cone on the other, with, of course, frosting in the middle. Now for the blade, which you can already tell is a giant lollipop with ice cream on top, and of course, with sprinkles and a cherry on top. Now, I had a little struggle when it came to the lollipop, because I wanted to be like those rainbow spiral pattern lollipops kids like. One, the spiral was a bit of a doozy, since I wanted to do it in a single stroke, which I had a hard time with. But the hardest part was the coloring the pattern to be specific. So before I got to coloring the rest of the blade, I went and handled that one first. And oh my god, I was going insane! Why did I think a rainbow pattern lollipop would be better? I could have gone with a single color. But no, I had to be creative. The rest were simple, but my laptop couldn't handle the amount of detail. Well, the amount of layers I had to make for this thing. But looking back at this makes my mouth water. I would demolish this thing, to be honest. But I don't want to get diabetes, so I'll let this stay. For now. Day 18 sword is bubble. There's not much explanation for this one, since it's that simple. This entire sword is basically a whole bubble one. You can see here that the blade is a big bubble one. Now for the handle, I wanted the blade to be held by a bottle. You know, those bottles that has those bubble liquids inside, with the cap on one side with an extra bubble bottle on the other. I just wanted to add an extra bottle so the sword wouldn't feel naked. For the handle, I want it to be like those long bubble bottles that you can see the wand inside that is surrounded by the liquids, which in my opinion are my favorite kind of bubble bottles. And of course the finishing touches to this piece is to have bubbles. You can't just have a bubble sword in the open without bubbles, can you? No, that's insane! I would love to see this in real life, to be honest, because, you know, bubbles! My bubbles. Ladies and gentlemen, he, she's, and theys all around. We are about to go on lockdown after what you're about to witness, because day 19 sword is prison. At first, I was going to make a sword out of those cafeteria spoons and forks that prisoners use to eat, and shank people in the shower. But I had something else in mind. I've thought of the activities prisoners do behind bars, weightlifting, and mining. So I drew a pickaxe as a blade. I know it's not a sword, but let's be honest, anything can become a weapon in prison. But with the blade taken care of, I went a little creative by making a dumbbell as the handle with a ball and chain attached to it, and possibly with the prisoner's name tag on the ball and chain. Oh, and I added a license plate, because I think they make those in prison if I remember correctly. And the plate would have the letters SRD, which is clearly sword, and the numbers 2025 for the year, representing Swordtober 2025. One more thing, this sword felt a little naked, so I went and gave those little black and white pattern hats for the blade and the cloth around the handle. I gotta say, I really love how this came out, and possibly one of my favorite swords I have made. I hope this sword doesn't count as contraband. Okay, we are 2/3 of the way there for this challenge, but this sword was, literal hell, because day 20 sword is devil. So of course, just to be safe, I looked up some stuff that involves the man down below. So before I got to the easy part of the sword, which is the blade of course, I went and worked on the handle design first. For the middle would be a head of a devil with an evil grin on it, that is surrounded by a mountain of skulls on each side. And for the stick part, I did a little devil deed and made it out of a goat leg. I still don't know why goats are involved with the devil. Maybe because of the hooves? I don't know, I'm not a cultist. I made sure to add the devil's wings, and I went to the easy part, the blade. And of course, yes, it would be the devil's pitchfork as the main blade. On fire too, of course, because, well, hell involves fire. Oh, and I almost forgot about the devil's tail. Without it, this whole piece would feel empty, for the sake of the blade. Okay, that did sound cult-like. Day 21 sword was also difficult because day 21 is sour. Like what I did with the sweet sword by making it out of sugary sweets, I thought of the exact opposite with the sword, with fruits and vegetables, but only those that are sour. So I had to research some materials that I can use for this sword, especially when it came to the part of the blade. So for the handle, I used both a lemon and a lime, because I didn't want to leave those out. On top of the blade would be a green apple, because they are also sour, which I checked. Now the hard part would be the stick and the handle. It took me time researching what I was going to add. At first I was going to add a cucumber to my sword, but then I realized that it doesn't count as a soury food. So I instead used a pickle, which does classify as sour. I was going to make it the part of the blade, but I figured it looks stupid, so I put the pickle as the handle instead. Now for the blade, I went and used, I don't know what it's called, a rhubarb? R-H-U-B-A-R-B. I've never seen this before, but as long as it is in the class of sour food, then that's enough for me. I went and made sure that grapefruits also count as sour foods, so I put it on the side of the lemon and added a little umbrella. I guess I wanted to make it like those little cocktails that bartenders put their umbrellas in. Seeing this makes my mouth dry already, and I don't even eat these things. But it's fine. Day 22 is music. At first I was going to make it a big microphone, but then it came to me. I can use other things that can form this sword. So I went and grabbed some materials that can rhyme with the word microphone, which I just discovered a couple days ago. Xylophone and metronome. You know, those things that go tick, 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 tick. Yep, I use my childhood instrument as like my blade, with the microphone at the tip. I had a bit of a struggle evening the part of the xylophone, trying to make sure that they are evenly spaced out, but I did give it my best shot. Now for the handle, the metronome, yes, the ticking thing, holding the xylophone. And you can see on the sides, you can see the sticks that like play the xylophone. Forgot to mention that I use a conductor baton as like the handle. For finishing touches, with music, I added some musical notes surrounding the blade, and of course, a treble clef, which I discovered that that's what that thing's called. I put it on the xylophone, just for fun. Now for coloring, I went and used plain, simple colors, but for the xylophone, I made it a simple rainbow, because why not? I just didn't want the xylophone to be plain, I want it to be like colorful, I want to add some color to the sword. So if I were to make some music, I would use this as like my main instrument, to be honest. Oh, I hope you guys are feeling well, because day 23's sword is sickness. Before I came up with this sword, I immediately thought of like a running nose. So I used a running nose to make the blade. I thought it'd be a little creative for snot coming out of the nostril, so that way it can form that blade. I went and made the handle out of something that might help with sickness. For the handle, I used a box of tissues with some pills surrounding the blade, and if you see here, at the bottom of the box of tissues, there's a little cup. You know, those cups that people drink of that disgusting medicine to make their throat feel better? If like NyQuil or something like that? For the stick part, it's a thermometer with another pill jar. I was going to make it an ibuprofen jar, but I didn't want to do that since I didn't want to go full detail. So I just made one that says medicine. And if you see here on the nose, it's like those little ice packs that you put on your head to like cool your head down. Thank God I wasn't sick when I made this. I love being healthy. Yeah, you guys stay healthy too. Okay, this sword was definitely a challenge because day 24 sword is opposite. And yes, this sword is going to be a double-bladed sword. Yay! But the hard part was thinking of two things that are completely different from each other. I was thinking of fire and ice, but I already made those. So I thought of things that can be good for the sword, emotional wise. Happy and sad. I first got the emotion faces down. For the blade part on each side, it would represent the emotion. For example, for happiness, it would be a sun because, well, sunshine makes you feel like a whole new person and feel like joy. I don't know, I don't go outside. The blade would be a standard plain one. For sadness, there would be raindrops, since rain can make you feel like you're having a bad day and, I don't know, have some heavy emotions. For the blade part, it would be a squiggly blade. Actually, thinking about this blade, the blades are also exactly opposite of each other, since one side is like completely straight and normal, the other is like squiggly and non-normal. Oh, and for fun, I added a thumbs up and a thumbs down right beside the expressions. For coloring wise, it wasn't that difficult, but not for the handle and not for the emotions. For coloring, I used the invert tool, and yes, I wanted to use like yellow and blue for this one, because those colors can represent well for these kinds of emotions. I'm actually glad how this came out. I don't know how I did it, but I am happy about it, so thumbs up for me. Day 25 sword is puppet. When it came to that word, at first I was going to make a wooden sword, but I also discovered that there are also stuffed doll puppets. So instead, I made a stuffed sword. Like Build-A-Bear, I built a sword. For this one, I wanted this sword to look like those dolls that had been stitched multiple times. So I portrayed the sword to have it around them. I even added some patches around the sword, because I didn't want this blade to look plain. And I even added some stuffing that can show what kind of sword this is. And to also show that some dolls can have a bit of stuffing outside of them. And just for a little goof, I added those thin needles that you put on voodoo dolls. I don't know why I added them, but since voodoos are also count as like puppets, I think that counts enough for me. Now for the final part, for puppet, I made those like wooden cross things with strings that you can like control the puppet. So for the sword, I went and put each string on each part, one on the blade, two on the crossguard, and one on the handle. I actually love this sword, and it is staying, folks. No strings attached. Oh, wait. Day 26 is number. Now, hear me out on this. When it came to this sword, I thought of making the sword out of those number illusions. Those number illusion puzzles that you have to say what numbers you see. For the first time, I sketched how this sword is going to turn out. Because usually when it comes to sword timber, when I draw swords, I just go for it. But for this, I had to plan on what it's going to turn out. I thought of making the sword out of the numbers between 1 through 7. And yes, the numbers from top to bottom are not in order. I didn't want to involve 8 and 9, but after going through the sketch, I discovered that part of the blade has the number 9, if you see here. I didn't want to change the design because, well, it's the only design I have and I couldn't think of any other numbered illusions. So I ended up bringing up 8 and 9. For coloring, I just didn't want it to be a single color because it looked boring. So I divided the sword into 3 parts. As usual, the blade, the crossguard, and the handle. You can see the parts which is being described by color, which the gray part is obviously the blade, the gold part would be the crossguard, and the brown part would be the handle. So do you guys actually see the numbers? And what other numbers do you see that I don't know about? Let me know down below. Day 27 is probably my favorite. Ooze. You can already guess that the sword is entirely made out of slime. And you're right. I wanted the sword to be an experiment gone wrong, in which you can see a little flask near the handle that is surrounded by slime. I wanted the slime to portray it as like the sword for this art month challenge. And of course I made it look drippy, since most liquidy stuff like slime is kinda like that. For the color, I wanted it to be purple, since purple can classify something as like poison, which the ooze is, a poison sword. So make sure to wear gloves. I didn't want this thing to be a singular color, so I added an extra, green. At first I was going to make it like a striped pattern, but it looked silly, so I added the green as like a fade color at the end. I should have gone a bit more creative, but I liked how this turned out, so again, if you want to hold this sword, make sure to wear gloves, unless you want to get poisoned. Unless you're immune to poison, which is impossible, but that's fine with me. Only I can hold the sword because I'm immune to my own swords. Day 28 is tool. Now, for the sake of the sword, I wanted to look up some tools that I wanted to work with. And yes, I wanted to put a toolbox as the handle. Speaking of the handle, for the stick part, it's just a wrench. Yeah, nothing to explain about that. Let's get to the blade. For the blade, I mixed a bunch of tools known to man. I used a half part of a handle of a screwdriver, so that way it can hold the rest of this wonderful blade. For the top part would be a hammer, but wait, the hammer is not a blade. Where's the blade, you might ask? To answer, at the top of the blade would be a part of snippers. You know, snippers to help cut things, like scissors but stronger. I like to thank my job for making me use snippers as much, and like as inspiration for the sword. Now for the bottom of the part of the handle, which you can see here, what appears to be a saw, in case you want to also cut things as well. I was going to add some extra tools to the toolbox, but I decided not to, since again, I'm a coward. The coloring wasn't that complicated. It was simple colors like gray, black, blue. I like blue. I was going to use yellow for this. That felt too obvious, so I went and used a color that I didn't usually use, which is orange. And I was glad to make that choice, because orange seems to blend in with this sword. Gotta say, I did a great job making this sword, and if I don't have any tools right on me, I'm sure something like this would definitely come in handy. Alright, for those who have arachnophobia, be aware because day 29 sword is spider. Now, for the reason I chose this word as the prompt was because I couldn't add spider to my insect sword last year, because spiders are arachnids. So I added it to my prompt because I would feel happy about it, so yippee for me. Anyways, the handle, of course, would be a spider on it, looking mean and menacingly. And for the stick part, it would be decorated by the snake's venom and would also have web on it. For the blade, it's just a normal blade, but also covered in webs, because I thought it looked cool. which it is by the way. I was going to add some extra spider legs on the blade, but they do look far apart, so I put the legs together like an actual spider. I was excited for the coloring part because I wanted to use the following colors: red, purple, green, white, and that's it. Which they are the best color suited for this kind of creature slash weapon. Mostly weapon, but mostly creature. Even though I didn't get to make a spider sword last year, I'm really glad I got to make this one this year. And once again, for people who are scared of spiders, it's understandable for you to skip this part. I too am not a fan of spiders, but I did want to make a spider sword. Alright, we are now at the final sword. Day 30, Angel. For this last sword, I had to research one last time, just one last time. And I researched hard for this last sword. For Angel, I had to make some few changes around the handle. At first, I was going to have a Bible at the center surrounded by a big cross, but I removed it because it looked weird. So it's just a whole cross instead. A golden cross to have 3 crystal rubies, one at the top and one on the sides of the cross. No, none at the bottom because no. For the center of the cross, I was going to make a figure of an angel, but I didn't want to do that. So yeah, it's just a circle pattern like in gold. Oh, and of course, I did mention that the cross handle would also be made out of gold, since I think that's what most crosses are, entirely made out of gold. I don't know. The blade didn't have anything special except some few things. When I was thinking of angels, I didn't want to just add like 2 wings and a halo. I was thinking of the biblical form, the creepy things with the rings around it that has a bunch of eyes with a bunch of wings. Yeah, I went with those. So around the handle would have 6 wings surrounding it instead of 2, which I have a hard time drawing wings, so I had to look up some wings many times and get the gist of it. Now for the blade, it would have the biblical form of the eye ring, which I don't know what else to call, so I'm gonna call it the eye ring. I had a hard time getting into detail because I had to draw so many eyes and had to make sure that it doesn't like overlay the sword. Well, it kinda is, but I don't know, just go. Oh, and of course I added the halo. How can I forget that? One more detail I wanted to add was to make sure that the sword is holy. So I made the blade and the angel halo glow to show its light. And I gotta say, thank you God for giving me the ideas on how this design came to be. And thank you for making me complete this challenge. Amen. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. I gotta say, doing my own sword temper challenge was a ride. I mean, sure, I came up with the prompts myself, I still tend to struggle with most of them, especially when it came to the abstract sword. But all in all, I'm glad that I got to do sword temper again. Also, I was planning to do another sword temper prompt list while I'm doing my own, but I didn't want to stress myself of doing 2 sword temper lists at the same time. Besides, I was focusing on school and some other art month challenges. But back to the point, this actually was my first art month list for September, and it makes me want to make more prompt lists for the other months, so I'll keep that in mind. For the swords, some were actually difficult, even around the last half of them. I'm not even sure how I came up with their designs for some of the word prompts, so I'll just pat myself in the back and kiss my true sword, my pen, and my mind. I think with this, I have at least 90 swords. And holy crap, that's like close to 100. Maybe I'll make some extra 10 to reach that. But that's for another day. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching my sword temper video. I'm glad I didn't get to upload this next year, like I did with my previous sword temper video, and I would have felt sad and cried in the corner, but I didn't. So if you want to see more in the future, feel free to subscribe if you want. Anyways, thank you guys again, and I will see you all next time. That's all. Ciao!